everyone, Brian here, and today I'm going to show you how I develop 35mm and 120 black and white film. This is something that I've been doing since I was in high school, and many years at this point. So today, I figure since I shoot a lot of film, and you've probably seen it on either my Instagram, Patreon, my own website, or Vero, or maybe even in an art gallery, I figured, let's take a look at this particular form of image making, printmaking. Well, no printmaking. I don't have an actual darkroom, but definitely film developing, because film developing is something that you can do in your own home. You could go to a photo lab, provided there are any still left where you live, and pay somebody to do it, but the closest one to me is a bit of a drive, so I choose to develop my own film, and also, I'm the type of artist that really enjoys developing film. I get very, very finicky and paranoid, quite frankly, when somebody else is touching my film. I'm just like, no, my babies! So, if I screw up developing my own film, it's my problem. If somebody else screws up my film, there's a bit of a problem here. So, I'm going to show you how you do it. But before we get into the process of actually developing the film, I'm going to show you what you need to develop the film. So I've got all my stuff here that I use to develop film. Some of it's even off camera, otherwise I'd just be surrounded in stuff. It's less stuff than you actually think. It's not really a whole lot of stuff here. But we're going to start off with the first thing. First thing you're going to need is a film changing bag. Most of you probably don't have anywhere in your home a specific dark room, like an actual photographic dark room, or anywhere in your home that is 100% light proof. So you need to find a way to load your film in the dark. So enter this film changing bag. And how it works is that it is a double-lined bag. It's got a bag inside and a zipper. And then once you zip that up, you fold the flaps over, giving you another way to inhibit light leaks. And then you have these two sort of sleeve things. These sleeves, this is the way you do it, is you shove both your arms in these sleeves and you can do everything you need to do while you're in the changing bag. Yes, loading your film is something that has to be done in the dark, because if you were to crack open your film now, in all this light, well, you just kissed your roll of film goodbye. So, film changing bag number 1. For the rest, that was the largest piece of equipment. For the rest, we're going to get down a little closer here, so come right in. So after the film changing bag, the next thing you need is a developing tank. Now, these are light-tight film developing tanks that you're going to be using this for the entire film developing process. Now, I have 2 sizes of tank here. This one here, this is for use for developing a single roll of 35mm film. This larger one, you can develop either 1 or 2 rolls of 35mm, or you can use it to develop a single roll of 120 film, or otherwise known as medium format film. I'm going to be developing both types of film, I should say, in this video. So that's why I've got both of them out. These are the only 2 I have. You can buy, there are developing tanks around here that are much bigger, much taller. You can use to develop 2, 4, even 8 rolls at once. It's not something I personally recommend. Even though I've developed hundreds of rolls of film, I always develop my film one at a time, because if, God forbid, something goes wrong in the developing, you lose one roll of film instead of 2, 4, or even more. So, developing tanks are usually purchased as a kit, because it'd be kind of stupid to make you buy all the individual parts of the developing tank. So what a developing tank typically comes with is obviously a lid, a top piece that is the actual light tight part of this. Chemicals get poured into the center here while you're developing. So as you load up the tank in the changing bag, you put your film in there. Next to that it comes with is the spiral itself. This is the spiral. This is what the film actually goes on when you're loading it. So this is what's called a spiral tank. These things come apart. They're very easy to put together and assemble. And this is an adjustable. This is an adjustable reel. This can adjust for both 35 millimeter and 120 film. Right now it's set for 35 millimeter. If I were to expand that, let me just find a little notch here. Now it's ready to go. Now it's ready for 120 or medium format. And when you are getting a spiral reel, I cannot emphasize this enough, get a reel that has this specific guide on it. It will make your loading film so much easier. Most developing reels come with, I'm going to show you on this one, most developing reels come with something like this. I don't know if you can see that there. There's this tiny little nub right there. That's all that gives you to help you load your film on. And especially when I was learning how to develop film, I ruined more rolls trying to find that little tiny guide. So make sure you get a developing reel that specifically has this sort of guide on it. It will help you a ton. You may have to buy the reel, an extra reel, for your developing tank, but that's okay. They're not really that expensive. So the last piece of a developing tank is usually this little plastic knob here. It goes in the center of the reel, and you use this. I mean, this serves two functions. One, it holds the reel in place so it doesn't bounce around as you're developing it. But also, there are these tiny little notches inside that little sort of black plastic piece here. If you chose to use a rod to agitate your reel as it develops, you'd stick a little plastic rod in the center here where the chemicals go, and you would move it around every so often during the developing process. That's just one form of agitation. We'll talk about what agitation and all that as we develop film. The next thing you need is a thermometer. Very useful tool, because you need to make sure that the temperature of your chemicals matter. Temperature is immensely important. Because whatever the temperature your chemical is, specifically your developer, that sets the stage for your entire developing process. Everything comes off of that developing time. Next up, you're going to need just a regular bottle or can opener here, because on a typical roll of 35 millimeter, you have to pry off the top. And you do that just by, you put the bottle open on here and you just pull. It may take you a few pulls to get it, but it does the job. You are going to need, obviously, a pair of scissors for cutting the film when it reaches the end of the reel. And in the dark, when you're in that changing bag, you're going to need that pair of scissors to cut off the leader, the film leader, so that you have a nice straight edge to load your film onto. So it loads very much like this. And I will show you how we do that in the day. I'm going to take some ruined rolls of film for your amusement and show you how to do it in the daytime. You are going to need a set, 3 to 5 of just some regular measuring cylinders, because that's how you're going to measure out your chemicals. You can get them very cheaply. I've got not only those, but I also have a set of... Oh, that one still had some water in it. It's all right. I also have a set of these variety sizes as well for mixing chemistry. So, whatever. Just a little water, because I was washing these just before recording. All right. So now that we have talked about all the different equipment that you're going to need, let's talk about the chemicals. And we start off with the most important one. Well, I mean, they're all important, but this is what kicks off the process. This is your developer. I am using Ilford ID11 developer. It comes in a powder form, because when you buy your developer in a powder, it's typically cheaper than buying it in actual liquid concentrate. This is just, I use Ilford because every roll of black and white film I shoot is Ilford, so I just choose to stay consistent. Filmmakers design their film so that you get the best results if you use their film and their chemicals. It's not a hard and fast requirement. When I was in college, I shot a variety of different types of black and white films. Ilford, Fuji, Kodak, and we used Kodak D76 developer. So you can use any type of black and white film developer. I just use Ilford because I shoot Ilford film predominantly when I'm shooting black and white, and I just like to have consistency all across the board. But this is, again, your developer. It comes with a set of instructions on how to mix. All the chemicals do. All the chemicals I'm going to show you do. But that's your developer. So that's the first chemical that gets used in the process. After developing comes what's called stop bath. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It stops your film developing, because even after you pour your film out of the developing tank, your film is still developing, and this will stop the process. It's a low odor citric acid stop bath. It's very orange in color, and it stays good for a very long time. Usually most stop baths have a chemical in them that will let you know when the stop bath has been exhausted. In this case, this will turn purple. After your stop bath comes the fixer. The fixer is what fixes the film, the image, I should say, the negative. It makes it so that it is safe for your film to come out of the developing tank and be shown in daylight. Without this particular chemical, your film would be ruined if you took it out of the developing tank. So this very important chemical makes it so that it fixes your film so that it becomes daylight safe. The next chemical after that I use is called Washade. And what this does, this is not a required chemical the way the previous three were, the developer, the stop, and the fixer. This is a time saver for me, because once a film has gone through the fixing process, you then have to rinse the film, and usually a rinse can take 10 minutes. Just constantly running water in the developing tank so you can get all the fixer out. This particular chemical, the wash aid, cuts down on that time immensely. It reduces the rinse time from about 10-15 minutes down to 5. So this helps remove any residual fixer that remains after the first wash. And then the final chemical that I use is something called Ilfotol. Think it's a wetting agent. Think of it like jet dry for your film. That's probably the best way I can come up. You know how when you use jet dry in a washing machine, it's supposed to prevent like water spots from forming on your glasses or your plates or your glassware. Think of that, but with film. This covers the film nice and evenly right at the end. It's the last step, and makes it so that while it's drying, it prevents water spots from forming on the film, because nothing is more irritating than when you take your film out, it finishes drying, you go to scan it, and you see a big old water spot on it. It's like, oh, because those are a bitch to get out. So this stuff is wonderful. I did forget a piece of equipment that will definitely help you. There's 2-quart black jugs to put all of your mixed chemistry in. I have about 5 or 6 of these, and you're going to need them for when you mix and make your chemicals. And every single one of them is labeled, of what it is, the date that I made the chemical, because they do have a shelf life. Other pieces of optional equipment that may make your job easier. A shower rod. This is a helpful piece of equipment for me because when you finish developing your film, when the film is finished developing, you need somewhere to dry it. Now, most of us probably do not have a film drying closet the way I did when I was in high school and in college, where it was a heated closet where we hung our film. It was a dust-free environment, and your film was dry within 15-20 minutes. We don't have that. So what I do with this is I put this shower rod in my shower, and then I hang a hanger off of it and clip the film to the hanger so that it just drapes straight down over the tub and dries from there. It's not necessarily a dust-free environment, but I do not have a clean room in my home, so this is what I use. Finally, film clips. You don't have to. These are clips that are specifically meant for hanging film. You don't have to go out and buy these. You can use any sort of weighted clip. You could use a clothespin. You could use binder clips. So something to weigh down the strip of film as it's drying, because you don't want the film as it's drying to curl back up, because it's going to want to do that. All right. Now that I have shown you the equipment that we're going to use for the film, if you're to buy all of the equipment that I have shown you, it's going to run you between $150 and $200. It's a little bit of a significant outlay at first, but after you get all of that, the only expense that you'll need after that going forward are the occasional replacement of the chemicals. Now, the good thing about a lot of these chemicals is that when you mix them, they're mixed in such a way where a little bit goes a very, very long way. So, there's that. So what I'm going to do now is show you how we load up the developing tank. So, this funneling, I'm going to show you what it looks like in broad daylight so that you actually know. Do not do this when you're developing your film for realsies, do not do this in open daylight. You will ruin your film. All those images that you shot will just be a puff of black when you go and develop the film. So do not do this in broad daylight. I'm just doing this here for demonstration, using film that is already old and ruined. So I'm not. These are rolls that I've never used. So let's do it. So as you see, I've got my developing my tank all assembled here. Let me take this. I'm going to leave the spool in there. It's like I have to think about this because I've done this so often that it's almost reflexive to me now. So I'm going to move that off to the side. So I'm going to take our dummy roll of 35 millimeter. I'm going to take our spiral reel here. I'm going to take my fancy can opener. I know the one I showed you just a few minutes ago was our good old faithful here. And this will work. This will absolutely work. I use this for every single roll. This fun doodad is specifically meant to pry open film canisters. So I'm going to use this just to save time because this will just pop this right off. So now all this gets done in the changing bag. I'm going to repeat myself. All this gets done in the changing bag. So you're doing this blind. Everything is going to be done by touch. So if you're doing this for the first time, you might want to put on a pair of latex gloves, or some sort of cotton glove. I mean, I do have a pair that I typically will use at the end of the film developing because that's when the film is most vulnerable. But it's is all done by touch, and it takes time. It takes time like anything else. So I'm gonna take my scissors, my film, my fancy prying opener doodad, and so when the film is all shot and exposed, typically the camera will wind the film all the way back so that there's nothing sticking out, so that you have no leader at all. So it just looks like this. So now we're going to get it. So once everything is in the changing bag, you start prying open your film. There we go. Almost. There we are. There we are. Now again, this film is old. Believe me, it's not too anything. I didn't just ruin a whole bunch of images. So your film comes out. It's going to want to unwind because it's in here under tight pressure. With scissors, you try to cut this leader off as best you can. You might not always get a straight edge, but we're going to snip that. Now, you fumble around for your reel. Now, again, this is the reel that had the good guide. It had the very good guide on it. So you take your cut edge, you glide it into here. Let it go past the ball bearings there. Yeah, that doesn't feel right. It wasn't on properly. So again, film goes here, past the ball bearings, and now you start spinning this. And as you spin this, you'll notice that my film is getting wound up on the reel. Every so often, I will reach back here and check to make sure that I haven't reached the end of the film. And you just keep doing that. Check every so often. And again, this is for a demonstration. I'm usually Just checking. When I notice that I'm getting near the end of the roll, I'll notice that on every roll of Ilford 35 millimeters, the end of the film is always attached to this little plastic sort of spool. So when I notice that'll happen, I'll reach in here, tear it right off, and just slow down, because I don't necessarily want to overshoot. And I will feel, just with my thumb here, if I notice that it feels plasticky here and I don't feel film anymore, I know that it's all the way in. So, once that's done, I will then take the bottom of my developing tank, feel around here for the bottom of that plastic spool, stick it in here, feel around, grab the top, make sure it is nice and tight. We do not want any light getting in here. There goes the shower rod. Put the lid on, and there it is. It is now ready for developing. Now, a roll of 120 film works the exact same way. So, I'm just going to do that. So, same setup, although this time I'm going to use the larger developing tank, because this will only hold, again, one 35 millimeter roll. This one will hold a 120 roll. So I'm making sure I have all that all situated. And this one I specifically marked dummy, so that I knew I'd be using this for this demonstration, as opposed to the 2 rolls that I'm going to be developing later on. So with a roll of 120, again, in the changing bag, this one does not have a metal piece on the film container to pry off, so you would just, in the dark, in the bag, rip open the tag, find where that film starts. There it is. I'm going to take the film, holding it by its edges, expand this. This is something I would have done before putting the film in the changing bag, expanding the reel so that it accepts the 120. And since this is already straight, you don't need to do any sort of cutting. Line it up in the tank, in the reel I should say, just like that. And same thing. It might give you a little resistance at first, but once it gets past it, it should glide on easily. If you feel any resistance, then something is obviously wrong and you might need to start over. We've reached the end. Now, for 120 film, Ilford puts a piece of masking tape on to indicate the end. So I'm just going to take that off. And then I'm going to take this off the back. Just like this. There we are. You have a full roll that is all the way wound in the tank, in the reel. Keep getting that mixed up. So, same thing. I'm going to stick this right in the spool there. Put this in the developing tank. Put my lid on, making sure that screws in nice and tightly. Put the lid on. And there is a roll of 120 film ready for developing. So now I've shown you what this happens, what it looks like during, just for demonstration, just in broad daylight. Now I'm going to do this for real. So, pray for me, will you? All right. Well, you've seen me show you how to load the film on the tank in broad daylight, but I'm actually going to do it in the changing bag. So, again, pray for me. But before I do, just want to show you just a little bit of film science, if I may, because I'm a nerd like that. So when you take out a roll of 35mm from the film canister, the side that is outwardly facing you, that's the shiny side. This is what you see. You see the negative of when you look at, when you see people do this, with a roll of film, they're looking at the negative image. So that's this side. It's the shiny reflective side. The back side of it, you'll notice, is a different color. This is the dull side, but it's also what the chemicals react to. This is the emulsion side of the film. This is where all of your light-sensitive chemicals are. This is what, whenever you fire the shutter, this is what the light hits. This is what it's reacting to. This is what's going to be developed. So when you are loading your film, you should be always checking. If you're not wearing gloves, and if you're doing this for the first, if you're really new with this, I strongly suggest you do, because you start putting your fingerprints all over both sides of the film, particularly the emulsion side. You're going to have big old fingerprints right on your image when you try to make prints of it, or when you go to scan it. And I've done that a few times, and it's like, oh. But this wonderful, gorgeous nature shot is just right on it. So, word of caution. All right, enough of me yakking. Let's load the changing bag. And I'm going to do the 35mm one first. So I've opened it up and make sure there's nothing in it from the last time I developed film. So, going in is the components of the developing tank, the bottom, the reel with its center black plastic piece, the container, making the top part, making sure I have the correct one. I do, yes, good. That goes in, the lid, the scissors, my can opener, again, using my fancier one just for time, of course, the actual film, the star of the show. Right here, this contains some images that I hope will come out in the developing. There's some dead things on here, and I'm hoping that when this is all done, dead things we will have. That goes in. And making sure I have all of the components. Spool. Always check, because once you crack the film open, game's on. Spool. Top piece, bottom piece, lid, yep, scissors, can opener. Good. Let's zip this up. Zip this up. Fold this over. There's Velcro tabs here. Let's dive in, and I will narrate the proceedings as I'm doing this. So, oh yes. Get these on. Best practices and all that. Get these going on. A little snug. Alright. So now we're going to shove my arms in here. Making sure that I go through both layers. It's double layered. So, alright. Dive in. Making sure to roll this up as far as it will go, because you want that sort of tight seal around your arms. You don't want light getting in, or as little light as possible. Okay, so now we're in the changing bag. So now I'm groping around for the film. There's the film. There's the scissors. There's the can opener. Okay. I've got the can opener. I'm prying open the film. Now you might be able to hear some of this. Okay. The top of the canister has been popped. Film is out. I have the leader in my hand. Scissors. See about giving myself a nice straight edge, or as straight as an edge as possible. This is always the tricky part, because the film, because it's so coiled up, wants to fight you. It really does. Also, you don't want to make sure you don't want to get more than just the leader in your scissors. That would be bad. There's the leader. There's the scissors. Leader's been cut. Okay. Find the spool. There it is. Find the beginning of the film. Find the beginning of the spool. Guiding the film through the spool. In the spool. Film's loading. Making sure to keep your hands on the plastic of the reel itself. So making sure that you're not touching the film as it's passing through the leader. As it's passing through the loader here in the spool. I'm almost at the end of the film. There's the end. I'm going to tear that little piece off that was attached to the end there. I'll hit this up a couple more times. One more time should do it. Do I feel plastic? Yes, I do. Film is loaded. There's the bottom of my... There it is. I'm a little panicking there. Okay, where's the bottom of that black centerpiece? Okay. There's the black. At this point, the film is in. I can take the gloves off now. Screwed on, nice and tight. There's the lid. And there we are. Open up the film bag. Open up the changing bag. And voila! A 35mm roll of black and white film ready to go for the developing. So, I'm going to do the same thing again, but with the 120 film for the larger roll, so you don't need to see me do that all over again. So, I'll see you in the bathroom. Wait, that did not sound as good as I had it in my head. We'll see you when it's time to develop. How about that? Okay, good. And here we are in our fabulous, high-tech Darkroom, which is not dark at all. Bathroom. The bathroom, where I get to develop all the film and all that fun stuff. So, we have our chemicals here in order. We have developer, stop, and fixer. And I've labeled every single one of these measuring containers with their intended purpose. So DEV, dev, stop, and fix. Now, as you'll notice, most of the chemicals that we're using are colorless. The only one that actually has any sort of color in it is the stop bath, and it looks like piss, quite frankly. But I know it's still good. It's at full strength because it is this color. If it was expired, this would be purple, and it would look like grape aid, and then you'd have to make up some more. General rule of thumb: before you develop film, mix your chemistry the night before. I say that because, particularly with the developer, all the other chemicals you can mix at whatever temperature water you like, room temperature preferably. The way the developer gets mixed is your water has to be at minimum 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius if you're using the metric system, for the powder to dissolve. It needs to be at that temperature or higher. Not boiling. It shouldn't scald you, but 104 degrees Fahrenheit minimum for the developer to dissolve. So once you mix that, give it a night to let it get back down to room temperature, and then you'll be all set to go. So how long does it take to develop a film? Well, that depends entirely on the type of film you're developing and the chemicals you are using. Now, with the film that we're developing today, the 35mm and the 120 film, they are both the exact same type of film, so this process is going to be identical for both films. They are both, and I'll show you, they're both Ilford Delta 400 professional film. And this is the 35mm, this is the 120 variant. Because they are the exact same film, it's the exact same emulsion, the exact same everything, the developing times for each chemical, well, the film processing times are going to be exactly identical. The only difference is that the 120 film, because of its wider stock, it's going to use more chemical than the smaller 35mm. But that's the only difference. Other than that, your times are exactly identical. So, how long do we develop this for? Well, you can find that out by one of a couple ways. The first, and probably what everyone will do at some point, they'll Google it. Ilford, in this case, Ilford has all of their developing times for all of their films, and not just for their own chemicals. They will have times and charts for the different brands of developers, Kodak D76, for Arista, for the several other Ilford developers. There's tons of different developers out there, all with their own different times. So you're going to want to find the time for the film and the developer you're using. We're using Ilford ID11 developer for this. The second way you can find out is right on the inside of the box. If you're careful and you do not rip your box open, this will actually tell you, right on the inside of the box, it will give you a handy-dandy table of all the different developing times for different developers. And so it says right here, I'm going to scroll right down, Ilford ID11. And it's going to give the specific times for this brand of film only. So I go to here, Ilford ID11, and it gives me 3 different times. It gives me the time if I'm using just straight developer, if I'm using a solution that's made of 1:1, so 1 part stock developer and to 1 part water. And a time if I was going to 1:3, 1 part developer, 3 parts water. I always use the 1:1 method because, for a couple reasons. One, it allows for more even developing a film rather than just putting straight developer in your developing tank. But if you're really, really pressed for time, you can do that. The other thing is that, if you're on a budget, it helps to stretch out the developer. The box that I showed you earlier of the developer, that makes 1 liter. So 33.8 ounces, 1,000 milliliters of developer. And if I'm using if I'm using that by itself without cutting it with water, then I'm going to get, maybe 3 rolls of film out of it. If I do 1-to-1, then I will get 4 to 6 rolls out of it. So that's for if you're on a budget, and it's a good way to stretch it out. So all the times that are listed here are for developing at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. That is the ideal temperature to develop film at. You can develop film at other temperatures. You're going to have to adjust your development time accordingly. If say your developing room, your bathroom, your darkroom, whatever, your chemicals are 70 degrees Fahrenheit, then your development time is going to be a bit shorter. If your room is colder, your chemistry is colder than 68 degrees Fahrenheit, your development time is going to be a bit longer. And so it won't have that information here because, tiny box. But you can go right onto the Ilford website or your whatever film company, their website, and it will give you a chart saying, okay, if you're developing your film at this temperature, this is how much additional time you should give. So, I know just from developing Ilford film, for example, if my temperatures here were 70 degrees, instead of a 14-minute development time at 68 degrees, it'd be more like 13, be closer to 13 minutes. And so you have to adjust either way. But temperatures above 72, 74, not really recommended. Because then, again, you're speeding it up. You're not allowing for things to develop slowly. This is a time-sensitive process. It's also a patient process. You can't rush this. This is not like digital photography. You just go click, boom, done, and you're out of there. This is going to take some time. This will also tell you how long to have your film in the other chemicals. It gives you not only developer time, but it also gives you how long you need to have it in the stop bath, how long you need to have it in the fixer, and how long of a final rinse you need. So that's good information there. This film I use a lot, so I've committed the time already to memory. It's 14 minutes at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and I always develop at 68 degrees. I don't want to have to do some math in my head to try to figure out, how to compensate for a warmer or colder room. So, if my chemistry, I'm going to have the thermometer in here is checking my chemistry, and I'm already looking at it now. It's at about 66 degrees. I'm going to have to warm that up a little bit. And you want all of your chemicals to be as close to the same temperature as possible. And the reason for that is because if you start your developer, if you start at 68 degrees and say your stop bath was 70 or 72, you're going to notice grain. You're going to have a grainier image. So, not necessarily enough to ruin the film. I mean, you're not going to ruin it, but you're going to notice, maybe your image comes out a little fuzzier because, your each temperature is adding a different variation. So you want to try to make sure if you're going, so right now this is at 66 degrees. So if you're going to develop at 66, you want to make sure that every one of your chemicals is at 66 and your rinse water is going to be 66. So you want to make sure you have consistency all across the board as you develop. I say that I always develop at 68. I don't want to have to think about, do I have to adjust this, no. So if this was warmer than 68 degrees, I would be putting this in a little container that has some ice in it, and just monitoring that and getting it ready to go. I always ambient room temperature is always colder than 68. I like the cold. So this is where I use another fun, nifty tool. I don't use it for hair. I bought this specifically for warming up chemicals with. I don't think I've ever used this on my hair, but, hair dryer. Good thing to have. So, I'm going to plug that right on in, and I'm going to start warming up these chemicals. So, right now, again, that says 66. And I want to make sure that my other chemicals are in line as well. Those I will warm up as the film develops, because I want to get it close to 68 as possible. Because this is going to take the longest. But once the 14 minutes go by, there's going to be some rapid dumping out of chemicals and replacing it with the next one in the set. So, before we start that, let's take out our lucky winner here. This was the 35 millimeter that I'm going to develop first. And as I said, because I'm using the exact same film for the 35 millimeter and the 120, developing is exactly the same. It's going to be 14 minutes on both films. I always like to do one at a time, just because I don't want to have to focus on two different films, things going on. One at a time. So make sure you have some hours sort of blocked off in your day for this, because again, this is an involved process. So let's start warming these up, and then we can go from there. Remember, this part is okay. This is the light, tight part of this. If this comes off, we're in trouble. But you have to take this off in order to put the chemicals in. So I'm just going to put that off to the side now. Let's warm up. Okay, we are at 68 degrees on the dot. So, once the chemicals go in, that is when the clock will start. So I'm going to take my little timer here, I'm going to put that for 14 minutes. We're good to go. 68. Okay. Pour our chemicals in. And we are on. As soon as all the chemicals are in, start the clock. And then we're going to agitate. We're going to get our film covered in this developer. And we're going to be doing this for the first 30 seconds of this process. And then we're going to be doing this every minute for 10 seconds. All right, 30 seconds have passed. We're going to put the, you sort of tap down on your counter like that, because you want to try to get, you want to get rid of the air bubbles, because if you have air bubbles, that is going to, it means it's taking up space. Your film, that area of the film that has air bubble on it isn't getting hit with developer. And it's going to lead to uneven developing if you have air bubbles. So now the first minute of the 14 has gone by. We're going to do this again. We're going to agitate the film for 10 seconds. This is about 3 or 4 times. It takes 10 seconds. And we're just going to keep doing that every minute of this process. And the reason why we do the agitation is because the developer, if you just let it sit there and don't do anything with it, the developer gets worn out. And it will lead to uneven developing. So you want to constantly agitate this once for 10 seconds every minute so that, you know, exhausted developer can mix in with fresh developer and areas of the film are constantly getting developed. So we're coming up on the end of the second minute of this process here. So we're just going to keep it on going. And then while that's going on, let's do this right now. While that's going, now comes the part of the program that is not necessarily environmentally friendly. We're going to have to start running this tap because we want to get we're going to be using this for our rinse water for when we get to the end here. But I need to make sure that that is also 68 degrees. I don't have a thermostat on this thing because it's a regular kitchen sink. So I'm just going to... I have a pretty good idea of where 68 is on this thing, but I will not know for certain. So over the next 11 minutes, I am going to fine-tune that. Coming up on the end of minute 3 here. And while that is going on, I'm going to, that stop is almost as like 67 and a half a degree variance I'm not going to worry about. It's when you start getting into whole numbers, like if it's within 1 degree, you're fine. But if we start getting into whole numbers, 1, 2, that's when you start to have to worry about. So I'll put that in the fix and just give an early check of my wrist. Oh, I can already tell just by feel that's too warm. You do this enough, you start recognizing your patterns. We're at end of minute 4. So yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this until the 14 minutes run out. I'm going to adjust the faucet here to make sure that I get a very close to 68 here on the water. And I'm going to, if I need to, fire up the hairdryer to make sure these chemicals are as close to 68 as I can possibly get it. So grab a snack or something. Alright, we are down now to the final minute and a half here in the process, and still doing the thing. The stop and the fix are now at the correct temperature. They're at 68. And our rinse water is just about there. So we have to do like these nudge things. Like this is one of those like very fine-tuned faucets where it's like a hair in either direction goes from either ice cold or lava. There's no in between here. So under a minute to go now. So when we're getting down to about 10-15 seconds left, we're going to start pouring the developer out. Now it's going to happen very quickly. I'm going to pour the developer out and then pour the stop bath into the developing tank because we need to stop the developing immediately because whatever developer is still on the tank and was still on the film will still keep going. So here we are, we're about 10 seconds away. Let's start pouring. That should end. Immediately pour the stop. Immediately pour the stop and agitate this for about, at minimum, 10 seconds. This does not take long. Minimum of 10 seconds. I don't bother resetting the timer for this. I just count inversions. I usually do about 10 of them. A bad take on bicep curls here. A couple more. So that stops it developing right where it should be. And now we're going to pour this out and go right to the fixer. So I'll leave that in for just a second. The fixer, it's a range. It's 2 to 5 minutes. And it's a judgment call. Depending on, I usually tend to go somewhere between 3 and 4 minutes. If the fixer is old, I will go for the full 5. I just made this fixer, so I could probably go 3, but I'm going to go, just for purposes of this demo, I'm going to go 4. Again, minimum of 2 minutes. Okay. Yep, right on the nose. And with the fixer, is the same process, the same steps that you use for the developer. It's the constant agitation for the first 30 seconds, and then 10 seconds for, the top of the minute after that. And then after this, it goes for its first rinse. 30 seconds of the 4 have gone by. Our rinse water is exactly 68 degrees. I finally got it. It took that entire developing stop bath time to finally get it, but I got it. 68 on the nose. So now the first minute of the 4 has gone by. And while that is going, I'm going to get the chemical that is going to follow the first wash, which is the wash aid. In which I have made a jug of this stuff in a 1-gallon jug here. This is not as photosensitive. It reacts with the same sort of so finicky with temperature the way the first 3 chemicals do. The developer, the stop, and the fix. Those are the 3 required chemicals. The wash aid and the wetting agent, the Ophotol at the end, those do not have to adhere strictly to the as close as 68. I mean, I already know room temperature is about 66, 67 in here. But once this fixer does its thing, it doesn't really matter anymore, because what we're doing now is fixing the film so that you can take it out to light and it'll be fine. So once this step is completed, the film it'll be safe if I were to take the lid and the top, the light tight black piece of plastic off. It would be safe. But it's not fully safe yet. We've gone the 2-minute minimum, and we're almost at the end of the 3rd minute. Now we're exactly 1 minute away. making sure that the water is still perfect, and it is. It is still exactly 68. Do want to keep checking from time to time because, you know, you never know where you live. You know, you leave it, you leave that faucet on one setting, and then over time, the temperature will shift. So I'm still checking this as we go along here. The first wash is 1 minute. So once we pour this fixer out. Now, you've seen me dump chemicals down the drain. At this point, the fixer. A special note about the fixer. The fixer is reacting to the silver that's in the film, and it's drawing it out. Got to the end of the 4 minutes. So the fixer actually contains actual metallic silver in the solution. You won't be able to actually see it because it is dissolved. It's suspended in the solution there. So typically you're not supposed to dump this down the drain because it contains actual metal in it. So I usually do. I'm kind of bad like that because I don't develop enough film to be able to have the great big quantities of used fixer to send off somewhere and get the silver for it. So, but I've seen some research on the internet that that there are ways to draw out the silver just even from 12 ounces, which is what I used here. So that's worth looking into. But yeah, there is silver floating around in this. When photo labs were much more prevalent than they were now, they had silver reclamation units that were all this used fixer. So now we come to the first wash. I've set the timer for 1 minute, and so I'm just going to put this right under the running water and just let that go. So what we're doing is getting the fixer off. Now, if we didn't have the additional chemicals, this would be the final step. And you'd be letting this run underwater for about 15 minutes to get all the fixer off the film. But since we have the wash aid, that's going to speed this up immensely. Wash aid is made by Ilford. It's also known by another, I forget who makes it, but it's known as Permawash by another company. The same idea. It's to remove the remaining residual fixer. Also, if you're lucky and actually do have a darkroom, the used fixer that you used on the film, this can now be used for making prints. The other chemicals you can't. Once they're used, they're spent. All right. So you've gone through the first wash. Now we're going to put some wash aid into it. So I already know that this holds about 12 ounces, and how do I know? I'll tell you in just a second. We're going to pour the wash aid in here. So I see it reach the top of that boat, which I just did. Put that off to the side. And the wash aid, you run this for 2 to 3 minutes. So now here's where you get your workout. Because with the wash aid, you have to do this for the entire time. You have to agitate, make sure that this wash aid just gets all the film, goes through and grabs all the residual fixer that didn't get washed out in the first rinse. You get tired of doing it in one arm, you just do the other arm. Oh, how do we know how much chemistry to use in the developing tank? Well, on this particular developing tank, it tells me how much liquid to use. It tells me on the bottom of the tank here. It says that, you know, it's for one roll of 35 millimeter, and it says it's 300 cc's of liquid. How's a cc? Cubic centimeter. 1 cubic centimeter is the exact same thing as 1 milliliter. So 300 milliliters. But screw it. Unless you have unless your measuring cups do actually give you a measure in milliliters, in which you could use that. You can convert that to fluid ounces by your friend Lord Google. And 300 milliliters, according to Google, tells me 10.1 ounces. I like good even round numbers that I can divide, so I just bump that up to 12. On my larger tank, the one that I'm going to develop, the 120 film, the measurements are actually inside the top lid. You know, you just turn the black lid over and it tells you, and it gives you those numbers for 35 millimeter and 120 in fluid ounces. So we've gone the 2 minutes. I'll do this a few more times and then we'll go from there. After this, we do the final rinse, at which point I can take this off. So a few more rounds of that. This can also be saved, the wash aid, because it will have some residual fixer and a little bit of silver still in it, but I typically just dump it because, again, I don't develop enough film where that's a thing. I know other photographers and environmentalists are going to scream at me, but I don't have the capability. So when the wash aid is done, you'll notice it looks like I just put soap in here. It's not soap. It's all wash aid. And when it comes out, it has a little bit of a purplish hue to it. That is the residual fixer being acted upon. So we'll clean that out. And now, because we've already gone through the fixing process, it's now safe for light. And now it's time for the final rinse. So I am going to now unscrew this and just let it run for the final wash, and that's going to be 5 minutes. So after that's all said and done, we are going to come right back for the final step. Alright, we are under a minute now, about 45 seconds away from the end of the final rinse here. And so I've taken out my jug of Ilfotol, the wetting agent, the jet dry, film jet dry. And because, you know, I'm prone to stupid errors, actually, when I make the jug of Ilfotol, I actually label it last step. So, also at this point, you're going to be wanting to get out, a thing of gloves, because when we take the film out in about a couple minutes from now, it's going to be very vulnerable. By vulnerable, I mean that the emulsion is wet. When you take the film out, that is at the point where it can be the most. You could still ruin your film at this step. So I'm going to take the film, dump the water out. And then I'm going to add the Ilfotol. Now, I'm leaving that going. Normally I'd shut it off at this point if I was done developing, but I still have another roll to process. So I'm going to leave that going so I do not lose my 68 degree water. So the Elfotol, we're just going to pour right into the open tank, and you're going to pour just enough to cover the spool. The film spool here. Just enough to cover it. You don't need to fill it all the way to the tip top. You just let that go. And that just needs to be in there 30 seconds minimum. 30 to 60 seconds is the range. I go the full minute. And again, what this does is that it reduces the risk for having water spots on your film as it dries. Because all municipal tap water, all tap water everywhere, what's in it is always different. You know, you might have hard water, you might not. But this sort of helps to ensure even drying and make sure that we do not have water spots or any sort of crud on that. Because again, it's a bitch to edit out when you are making prints or doing any work on Photoshop. So, I'm done here. Now behind the camera is where I have set up the shower rod and the hanger that we're going to drape this film off of. So, alright, we have reached the end of the time, and now it's done. Now it's done. Now is the moment of truth. So I am going to take a couple of film clips. And again, you can use clothespins, you can use binder clips, whatever. Just something to act as a weight and something to hang off the hanger. So I'm going to dump this Elfotol out. I'm going to take it out of the developing tank. I'm going to take out the black plastic. Now this comes apart. Now this just twists off like that. I'm hoping I got a nice even development. So now I'm just going to come right off the reel. So we're going to find out what that looks like after it dries, because again, right now it is very, very vulnerable. The emulsion can be ruined at this point, so you want to be very careful. So I've taken it by the top and by the bottom. I'm just going to go reach behind here, hang this off of the hanger. It's now hanging. I'm going to take this second film clip and put it on the bottom so that it has a weight. And voila! One completed roll of film. So that's going to dry, and that'll take, since I'm not using, my fancy college darkrooms drying closet. That'll take a few hours to dry naturally. So we're going to let it do that. If you're doing this at night, let it go overnight, you'll be fine. So I have one more roll of film to develop. I have a roll of 120 to develop. So we'll do that, and then we're going to wrap it all up. So I'm developing 120 film right now, and we're about halfway through the 14 minutes here. We're in the first stage of the development. And this is the first time that I have developed a roll of 120 black and white film since I took alternative processes at college. So 7 years ago almost at this point was the last time I developed a roll of that. So it made me realize a little too late that to develop a roll of 120 film in the larger tank that I showed you at the beginning, this requires 18 ounces of liquid. And the normal measuring cups here that I use to measure out chemicals for 35 millimeter they only go up to 16. So I've had to improvise a little bit because I always use the smaller tank, the 35mm. I don't typically use this one. Unless I've got a bunch of 35mm. That needs to be out, so I'll rotate them. But whatever. So I've had to put 16 ounces of the chemicals in their measuring cups. And then I have a stockpile of red Solo cups for, you know, all the parties that I'm not doing since we're in quarantine. And so that's like 16 ounces in there, and then the remaining 2 in these red Solo cup things. So things I will have to learn now that I'm developing 120 again. Get bigger measuring cups. So that'll be a future purchase. The ones that I used to use at college, they were never that small. They were always 1 liter. There was 32 ounces. So I might have to get some of those. Because now that I have a medium format camera, I'm shooting 120 again. So what you are seeing here, this roll of film that I'm developing, is the first roll of 120 film shot in that Pentax that I got recently. So I'm very excited to see what comes out of this. The more, you know, because I've been in quarantine, well, because we've all been in quarantine, I haven't been able to do any sort of studio shoots. So the roles that I've shot have been in local cemeteries, specifically the old local cemeteries. New York has a lot of old in it, and so, I mean, it's a great place to shoot. Everyone in the cemetery is observing social distancing, so no worries there. And they don't move. The subjects don't move, which is great. So I'm really excited. I shot 2 rolls, 2 test rolls at the Hudson View Cemetery in Mechanicville, New York, and we're gonna see how those come out. It's interesting. I'm very excited to see what the next chapter in my photographic journey will bring. So, but yeah, 120. So the water is off now, where it's because I'm not developing anymore today. So one more roll of 120 to develop, but that'll be another time. About 20 seconds left on the wetting agent on the Ilfotol, and then we're gonna see what it looks like. I am excited. I am just, yes, good. Because again, it's 7 years since I've last shot this type of film. So let's find out. What have we in there? What was the thing that Gomez Addams said in the Addams Family movie of Jewelry? Spirits above me, give me a sign. Shall I be joyous, or shall I be damned? Alright, let's see it again. Again, film is very vulnerable here. Oh, those look good. And the reason I say it looks good is because we have a full range of tones. So, I'm thinking. Oh, I cannot wait to scan this. I should actually use film clips. So there we are, full range of tones. Let's hang this up on the convenient shower rod that is behind the camera. Put my couple of clips on here to weigh it down. Excellent. And, oh, those look so good. I can't wait to scan them and see what they look like. So, yeah, once you are done with your developing, then you just clean all it up. All this stuff can be rinsed off with just regular tap water, and then, put on a towel to dry. And, it's all set to go for the next time. Because, like, again, once you buy all the developing tank stuff, you can reuse it over and over and over and over again. So, all set to go. Okay. Well, I have developed 2 rolls of film for you, so I'll see you back in the other room to wrap this all up for you. Well, there you are. We've developed 2 rolls of film today, and they look really, really good. I would love to show them to you right now, but they are drying, and if I take them out now, well, they'll be ruined and whatnot. So, what do you do when your film is all dried and, ready to be preserved? Well, I will show you. You put them in negative sleeves, which can be put into a 3-ring binder. Negative sleeves for 35mm look like this. 120 film, the sleeves look, it's basically just take these 2 rows and just squish them together. So you have three rows that allow you to hold all your 120 film, but when it's all said and done, you cut them up. Just out for curiosity, the 35mm rolls that I shot were 36 exposure rolls. They come in both 24 and 36. So this is what a full 36 would look like. It's 6 rows of 6 images each. And you'd put them, obviously, shiny reflective side toward you, emulsion side on the back. And same thing for 120, and, you put them in sleeves, and they will stay protected for forever. I have not had a single problem using them. So that's how you store them. After they dry, I will be scanning those negatives. I have an Epson Perfection V800 scanner, which will allow me to scan those negatives at high resolution for use in editing and the like. So, other points to note, because I've been doing this, I've done so many rolls, you may have noticed I was using my hands. I wasn't using any sort of protection at all. If you're doing this for the first time, maybe wear some of the latex gloves that I wore at the end there. Because while the chemicals themselves are not toxic, if you have very sensitive skin, they may cause some skin irritation. So if you want to, just put on a pair of latex gloves or similar material and do it that way. I've been doing it for so long, my hands smell of photochemicals. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's about it. So if you have any questions or comments for me, you can say so in the comments below. This was my very first video, and it probably shows. So I'm so used to doing podcasts. I'm more used to doing audio than visual. But if you would like to see the results of those 2 rolls once they're dry and I scan them, feel free, please subscribe and become my patron on Patreon. All the links will be down below. You can get early access to posts, some patrons only posts, because some of the work I do is not safe for work. And of course, you can always find my photography on my website, bjfrenchphoto.com. You can also check me out on Instagram at bjfrenchphoto, on Vero, vero.co/BrianJFrench, and so there you are. If you have anything you would like to add, any questions, I already said that, now I'm repeating myself. I'm just blathering on. So, hope you enjoyed this process. Yes, it's a lot of work, but I find it intensely rewarding, and, I mean, in the end, that's, for me, the name of the game. It's what I like to do. So, yes, I can always pay someone to do it, but then I personally get robbed of the experience of making the art. To me, it's not quite enough to just push the button on the camera and just, that's the end of my involvement. I like to see it from beginning to end. So, thanks so much, guys. I'll see you soon.